At the family party beneath fairy lights strung like lies and legacy, my father raised his glass, smiled at 50 guests, and said, Avery, let's just hope you don't ruin tonight like you ruin everything else. Laughter, a clink of glasses. My mother looked away. I stood up and walked out. No tears, no scene. Just silence sharp enough to make history. That night, I disappeared from their world. And 1 year later, they found out who I'd become from a photo they weren't in. I used to think silence meant distance. Now I know sometimes silence is the first sound of a life finally beginning. What if walking away isn't the end of the story? What if it's the first time you're actually seen? Before we get into the story, please use a period or comment to let me know where you're hearing this story from. Growing up a Harrington meant learning early that love came with terms. Three to be exact: degrees, titles, obedience. My brother Marcus followed that script flawlessly, Harvard Medical. Now a respected surgeon whose kids never wore anything wrinkled. My sister Claire. She made partner by 31 and married a man with 3 golf memberships. Me, I painted on walls, rearranged furniture compulsively, once turned the garage into a greenhouse for a 6th grade science fair. They called me creative, but always with a smile that meant temporary, like a phase they assumed I'd outgrow. I remember once overhearing my aunt whisper at a wedding Avery's sweet. She just hasn't found her lane yet. I was 29, running my own interior design studio, living in a sunlit apartment I curated down to the last candle. But to them, I was still the eccentric one with mood boards and overpriced throw pillows. They didn't see intention. They saw instability. They didn't hear passion. They heard risk. Every time I shared a win, a community mural commission, a sustainable space redesign, I'd get the same response: a polite smile, a head tilt, and then, so Marcus, how was that heart surgery like clockwork? I tried for years, showed up early to family dinners, decorated their events for free, even redesigned my parents' living room as a surprise. No one commented on the layered textures or soft lighting I spent days choosing. They just said, it's quirky. When Claire got engaged, I built a custom floral arch, hand-tied 300 blooms. My dad squinted and said, little much, don't you think? When Marcus had his first son, I gifted a watercolor sketch of the nursery I'd imagined. He laughed. Thanks, but we're hiring a real decorator. By 30, I stopped offering, not out of anger, but because I'd finally accepted a bitter truth. Some people will never respect a version of success they don't understand. Holidays weren't joyful, they were tests, landmines wrapped in ribbon. Every Thanksgiving, I brought a pie I baked from scratch. My father would announce Claire brought wine. Marcus brought prime rib. Avery brought feelings, I guess. Everyone laughed. I'd smile. Head to the kitchen, where I apparently belonged. At Christmas, they'd show off bonuses, real estate Tesla keys. Someone would inevitably turn to me, still doing that fun you stuff, as if my career were a diary entry. But the worst Mother's Day, I designed a custom herb wall for my mom. Hand-built, stenciled her initials. She barely looked at it. Claire handed her a luxury handbag. The room applauded. No one noticed the dirt under my nails. No one ever did. They didn't yell. They didn't have to. Their rejection came in silence and polite digs and omission. Like the Easter, I arrived late and found no name card. They gave me a paper one someone scribbled in Sharpie. Claire laughed. Avery's got the arts and crafts seat. Even the chair wobbled. I laughed too, but something inside me stopped blinking that day. They made sure I never forgot I wasn't just different. I was embarrassing. The moment everything shifted didn't come with fireworks or a screaming match. It came with Lamb Gone Cold, a silk dress, and the soft hum of a jazz trio playing like nothing had happened. It was their 40th anniversary party. The Harringtons went all out, rented a country estate, twinkle lights, strung like chandeliers, catered courses so expensive they came with accent marks. Claire handled the seating chart. Marcus made a slideshow. I made my dress. Dusky rose silk hand-stitched neckline, every detail chosen with intention. I told myself tonight will be different. Maybe they'll see me. Dinner was a blur of wine glasses and camera flashes. Claire toasted with her usual poise. Marcus followed, quoting a philosopher I didn't know. Then someone, probably Aunt Nadine, called out, Avery, your turn. I hesitated. Fork in hand, lamb cooling on my plate. Dad smirked. Sure, let's hear from the family artist. I stood slowly, heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my fingertips. I don't have a rehearsed speech, I began, but I just wanted to say, thank you for showing us that longevity and love is maybe spare us the poetry this time, huh? My father raised his glass mid sentence. Let's keep it festive. The room chuckled, polite, contained, sharp as crystal. I smiled, tight, sat back down, cheeks burning. Claire leaned over and whispered, You're too sensitive. It's just his way. But it wasn't just his way. It was always his way. Every dig disguised as wit, every edit disguised as care. I looked around that table at the candles, the wine, the linen napkins folded like origami, and saw it all for what it really was: a gallery of silence. A curated museum of all the times I swallowed my voice to make them comfortable. The lamb had gone cold, the wine now bitter. My hands trembled beneath the tablecloth. And then I stood. No toast, no rebuttal. Just a clutch in one hand, courage in the other. I nodded to no one in particular and walked out. Past the garden, past the fairy lights, past the vintage Rolls-Royce Marcus rented for family photos. No one followed. No one stopped me. Not even my mother. The air outside was cooler than I expected. Or maybe I had just gone numb. I got in my car, turned the key, rolled down the windows, and drove. Dress fluttering in the wind, eyes dry, mouth set. Not leaving in shame. Not this time. This time, I was leaving in silence. And silence, I realized, can be its own kind of revolution. After that night, I didn't rage quit the family group chat. I didn't post cryptic quotes or send dramatic farewell texts. I simply vanished. No Marcus's daughter's recital. No Claire's charity gala. I skipped Thanksgiving, Christmas, even Mom's birthday brunch. At first, there were messages. Are you okay? Then came sarcasm. Too busy for family now. Eventually, nothing. And that was the gift. Without their constant echo in my ear, without their tight-lipped smiles, their dismissive nods, I could finally hear my own voice. Not the edited one I used to rehearse in the mirror before family events. The real one. The one that had been whispering all along. You don't need to be chosen by people who only love versions of you they can control. I moved across the state to a small coastal town where no one knew the name Harrington. I found a one-bedroom loft above a florist shop. Exposed beams. Quiet light. A balcony that caught the ocean breeze like a secret. I started over. Not loudly, not with fireworks. I designed quiet homes, thoughtful spaces, places for people like me. People who had been told they were too much or not enough. People who built with feeling. I began sketching again. Not for clients. For myself. I filled pages with rawness light, falling on silence the way grief bends space, how hope looks when it comes back small but stubborn. Mornings became sacred. Barefoot across hardwood floors, coffee in one hand, pencil in the other. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Stillness took getting used to, like wearing someone else's shoes. But then, it started to feel like mine. Then one day an email arrived from a boutique architecture studio in Oregon. They'd seen my redesign of a sunroom someone had posted on a niche design blog. Floating light sculptures reclaimed wood-soft spatial rhythm. Their message was short: we're launching a wellness retreat. Would you be open to leading the spatial concept? I blinked, reread it 3 times. It wasn't just a job offer, it was a doorway. That project became the pulse of my year. Every floor plan, every material, every window placement, I touched it all like I was sculpting breath itself. And when the retreat opened 6 months later, Archform magazine covered it. The headline, Nature Reimagined a Living Space That Heals. They quoted me, not Marcus, not Claire, not my father. I wanted to design a space where even the quiet ones felt like they belonged. The article went viral in design circles, and with it came something I'd never had choice. Not millions, but enough. Enough to stop renting. Enough to choose my next space. Enough to say yes without asking for permission. I found it on a fog-wrapped Sunday morning, buried in an architectural catalog. A two-story glass and cedar home tucked between pines, wraparound windows, a garden that caught mist like silk, and a studio room with skylights that felt like breath. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like possibility. I closed the deal quietly, no social post, no group text. I moved in, unpacked in silence, hung my favorite print above the fireplace. You are allowed to take up space, and then I started planning the party. Not for show, not for them. For me. I called it The Gathering. White linen invitations, blind pressed floral embossing, gold ink hand addressed, no digital RSVP, just a simple reply card. Let's celebrate what we build for ourselves. I sent 35 to friends from design school, clients turned kindreds, two mentors who believed in me before I did. None went to the Harringtons, not to be cruel, but because I was finally choosing peace. The house was ready, honeyed wood floors, light that kissed every corner. The garden became magic. String lights swayed between cedar posts, rose petals scattered down stone walkways, a long oak table under a linen canopy. I curated everything: handmade ceramics, lavender creme brulee, live acoustic duo humming Nora Jones into the dusk. People arrived just before sunset, eyes wide, soft gasps. This looks like a spread from Elle Decor, someone whispered. But no one asked, did your dad help with this? Or where's the rest of your family? Because these were people who knew, not the family approved version of me, but the real one. The woman once called too sensitive, too whimsical, too dramatic. Now standing in a space built entirely on her own terms. Later that night near the fire pit, my friend Zoe pulled me aside. You realize this is your homecoming, right? I shook my head. No, this is the first time I've ever arrived. Someone snapped a picture of me barefoot on the porch, string lights curled around my wrist like bracelets of light. Zoe posted it the next morning. Caption: she was never lost, just never allowed to lead. And that photo, it lit the fuse. They weren't invited, but they saw everything. The next morning, my DMs exploded. Old high school friends, college classmates, even my 8th grade art teacher. You've always been Magic Avery. I cried reading Zoe's post. Finally, they see you, buried beneath the confetti emojis and virtual champagne. Were 4 names I hadn't seen in over a year. Claire, Marcus, Mom, Dad. First came Mom, saw the pictures. The house looks expensive. Why didn't you tell us? Then Claire. You really planned a whole event and didn't think we might want to be there? Marcus tagged me in an old family photo. Caption: some people forget their roots. And Dad. He sent a screenshot of Zoe's post. Just one line beneath it. So this is who you are now, no question mark, just indictment. I didn't reply, not out of pettiness, out of clarity. They hadn't asked about my life in over a year, not one phone call, not one. How's the studio? Not even a text when my project hit arch form. But now that there were string lights and applause, now I was suddenly theirs again. Their narrative couldn't hold me as the disappointment anymore, and that made me dangerous. 3 days later, Claire posted a photo. Harrington family dinner, TM. Everyone lined up at a long table under golden light. Caption: some things money can't buy. Real love, real connection. Comments poured in. Aunt Nadine. Exactly family first, no matter what. Mom. We raised our kids with love, that hasn't changed. Marcus, no egos here, just roots that don't break. I didn't comment, didn't like it, but someone else did. Zoe screenshotted the entire thread, sent it with one word: performative. She wasn't wrong, because it wasn't love that made them reach out, it was loss of control. For the first time, they weren't holding the pen in my story, and they couldn't stand it. 2 more days passed. Then came the email from Dad. Subject: your choices message. We saw everything. You embarrassed this family. You acted like we didn't exist. You made people think we don't love you. Maybe next time think before putting on a show. People are talking. He wanted shame. But all I felt was distance. Because yes, people were talking, but not the way he imagined. An editor from a Women in Design podcast messaged, your story moved me. Want to talk about building spaces that don't ask permission. A mentorship program for girls in architecture invited me to speak. Topic: Finding your space when you've always been the footnote. While they scrambled to rewrite the narrative, I was already building a new one. That evening, I walked the garden barefoot again, lit the candles along the stone wall, poured a glass of wine, and posted one thing to my story: white text, black screen. Silence isn't distance. Sometimes it's healing. They watched it, all of them, but no one replied. Not that night. Until the next morning. Claire, a text, just her. Coffee, just us. No performance. I stared at it for a long time, then replied, neutral place. No expectations. We met at a quiet cafe tucked between a flower shop and a bookstore. My kind of sanctuary. She was already there, stirring her cappuccino like it might give her courage. Hey, she said. Hey, I echoed. For a full minute, we said nothing. Then she exhaled hard. I know we've been awful. I won't defend it. She stirred her drink again. But seeing that party, seeing you like that, it felt like a slap. I raised an eyebrow. A slap? Yes, she said softer, like we were excluded. I sipped my tea, let the silence hold a beat. Claire, I've been excluded my whole life. From jokes, from plans, from mattering. She blinked fast. I didn't mean. That night wasn't revenge, it was the first time I celebrated myself without apology. She nodded slowly. I get that now. Or, I'm trying to. There was silence again, but this time it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like space. Then Claire said something I never expected. You always scared us, Avery. I laughed. You mean I didn't follow the family formula? She smiled faintly. Something like that, then looked up, eyes clearer. What would it take for us to try again? I met her gaze. Calm. Firm. You don't get to rewrite me. You don't get to call it teasing when it was erasure. If you want to be in my life, it's as an equal. No hierarchy, no performance, and absolutely no expectations of access. She took a long breath, nodded. Okay, she whispered. That's fair. She didn't ask to see the house, didn't ask for invites, just said one thing before she left. Can I try to do better? I looked at her. You can try. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure, but it was something real. And that I realized was enough. 2 weeks later, I got the email from Hearthform, a design publication I'd admired for years. They wanted a full feature, women who build differently. I almost said no, even after everything, because that old voice still whispered, don't make it a thing, don't be too much. But then I remembered how long I'd stayed small, how long I'd contorted myself to make others comfortable, how many times I'd laughed at jokes that hollowed me out. I said yes. The interview was honest. I talked about walking away from a family where I was always the footnote, about designing homes not just for beauty, but for breadth, for belonging. They asked about inspiration. I didn't name names, but I said this. Sometimes the places we leave shape us just as much as the ones we build. When the article came out, they used a photo of me barefoot in my studio, sunlight pouring through skylights, paint smudges on my fingertips, hair messy, smile soft. The caption, Avery Harrington. 33 built her space the way she lives deliberately and without asking for permission. It went quietly viral. Design clients reached out. Old professors sent emails. Even a woman I'd met once at a networking event messaged. Your story helped me walk away from people who never clapped for me. And my family. They watched in silence. No more guilt-laced voicemails. No more passive-aggressive photo posts. Just stillness. Like they finally realized something they couldn't undo. That I had left. And I wasn't coming back. That weekend, I hosted another dinner. Smaller this time. More intimate. Mentors. Clients turned friends. Zoe and Claire. She brought a bottle of wine and a bouquet of wildflowers. No brand name. No performance. Just soft sincerity. After dessert, we cleared the table together. Quiet laughter. Warm candlelight. She lingered near my bookshelf, ran her fingers across the spines. You know, she said softly, I think this is the first time I've seen you without armor. I looked up, really looked. She wasn't performing. She was showing up. I smiled. That's because it's the first time I've felt safe without it. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I walked out into the garden barefoot. The string lights swayed gently above me. The wind played across my collarbone like a promise. The table was still set quiet in the moonlight. And I realized something. I hadn't burned a bridge. I hadn't waged war. I hadn't gone scorched earth. I had simply built something better. Not a fortress, not a rebellion, just a home. One where I didn't have to shrink to fit, one where I didn't have to apologize to exist, one where I didn't have to wait for permission to speak. Because this time I made the table. There was no grand reconciliation, no weeping apologies under chandeliers, no slow motion hugs with piano music swelling in the background. Just time and truth. Claire texted occasionally, simple things. Photos of a painting she'd hung, a podcast she thought I'd like. Once a message that simply read, I never realized how much space we didn't let you have. I didn't rush to reply, but I read every word. Marcus never reached out directly, but I noticed he stopped tagging me in nostalgic family posts, stopped subtweeting silence, stopped pretending. Mom liked one of my Instagram posts, the one with a candlelit reading nook I'd designed for a client recovering from grief. Caption spaces heal when they reflect the parts of us we're told to hide. She didn't comment, but she saw it. And Dad, he stayed quiet, which was its own kind of answer. Because the man who once couldn't resist mocking me in front of guests suddenly had nothing to say when I had nothing to prove. The absence of noise from them. That used to terrify me. Now it just meant room to breathe. That spring, the Women Who Build Differently feature got nominated for an award. I didn't expect it. Didn't even attend the ceremony. I was in the middle of installing a sanctuary space for a domestic abuse shelter. But Zoe called me from the event screaming, You won, Avery, you actually won. She sent a picture of the engraved plaque. I looked at it on my screen for a long time, then closed my phone. That night I didn't go out, didn't post, didn't even light a candle. I just curled up on the studio couch wrapped in a blanket I'd sewn from old fabric samples and let the quiet wrap around me like something sacred. Because that was the real win. Not the press, not the party, not even the house. But this peace that didn't need permission. A self I didn't apologize for, a life that didn't ask to be translated. I used to think family was a table I had to beg for a seat at. Now I know better. Family is the people who don't flinch when you stand in your full light. People who clap when you say your name out loud without shrinking. Zoe and I still talk about that night, the one with the lights and lamb and laughter. She calls it my resurrection. I call it arrival. We frame that photo of me standing barefoot under the string lights. It hangs near the front door, next to the plaque, next to a hand-painted sign that simply reads, Welcome home, even if it's the first time you've truly been seen. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like your voice was always the background music to someone else's spotlight? Share your story in the comments. And if you're quietly building your own life without applause, just know you don't need their permission to arrive. Hit like. Subscribe for more real stories. And remember, you're not too much. You're just not in the wrong room anymore.
What if the people who claim to love you, never really saw you at all? That question echoed in my head as I stepped through the side gate of my parents' backyard in suburban Austin, Texas. I was exactly 21 minutes late on purpose. Not to make a scene, just enough to avoid the suffocating hugs, the tight-lipped smiles, the inevitable first question from my aunt, still single Aisha. The air smelled like grilled shrimp skewers and money-expensive candles from Emily's registry, burning on every table. Twinkle lights lined the fence like they were trying to make the evening sparkle, even if the love in the air felt more filtered than real. Emily, my younger sister, was the star of the night. Her engagement dinner, her moment, her curated perfection in champagne silk and a ring big enough to cast a shadow across the entire patio. I wore black, not out of defiance, just because it was simple, comfortable, non-threatening, and apparently offensive. "Oh, you look cozy," Emily said the moment she floated over. Her voice sugary sweet, but her eyes flicked up and down my outfit like it was something she needed to write a Yelp review about. "You've always had such simple taste." I smiled, tight, practiced, unbothered on the outside. "Good to see you too," I replied, slipping past her toward the table, the one they made sure was full before I arrived. The only open chair was half a seat between Uncle Marcus, who smelled like old cigars and strong opinions, and a planter full of lavender no one had trimmed since spring. I sat. I nodded. I made small talk while sipping still water and watching them toast with sparkling rosé. The table buzzed with news of Emily's new job at the PR firm, of her fiancé's upcoming promotion, of our cousin Deja's pregnancy. Finally, a real family woman, our aunt declared. No one asked me anything, not even a polite "what's new" they never did. For them, my life was a blurry afterthought. The older sister who never brought a date, the tech girl who moved away and stopped posting updates, the one who always sent expensive gifts but never explained how she could afford them. When Emily turned to her fiancé and announced Aisha's always been so practical, I nearly choked on my water. Her voice danced with fake affection, the kind that cuts sharper than outright cruelty. "She's good at stretching things. I mean, she's still driving that old gray car, aren't you, Aisha? Laughter. Light. Just teasing." Except it wasn't. The laughter turned into chuckles around the table. Uncle Marcus leaned in and added, "What is that thing, a 2008 Civic? That car's got more miles than my lawnmower." Emily tilted her head toward her fiancé again, clearly enjoying herself. "She's just very grounded. Never let appearances get to her," she said with a smirk so subtle only someone who grew up with her would recognize it for what it was, war paint. I smiled again, this time softer. My silence was armor. Let them laugh. Let them keep writing their little narrative, the one where I was the frugal older sister with no Instagrammable life and no +1 at holidays. Let them believe I'd settled for less. I wasn't here to prove anything. But fate had other plans. Just as the servers began clearing dinner plates, Emily's fiancé leaned across the table. His tone was casual, curious, almost absent-minded. "Hey, Aisha, this is random," he said, glancing up with a fork still in hand, "but last weekend in St. Bart's, we saw this Gulf Stream on the tarmac. Jet had something like Vance Capital on the side." Then he looked at me, squinting just slightly. "Any chance you know anything about that?" And just like that, the entire table froze. Forks paused mid-air. A wine glass clinked and went still. Even the soft jazz drifting from the Bluetooth speaker seemed to hold its breath. My eyes met his. I held his gaze. Then slowly, I smiled. "Yeah," I said, simply taking a slow sip of water. "That's me. No raised voice, no smug tone. Just the truth. And that truth cracked the entire room open like a thunderclap under silk. But I had no idea what was coming next. My sister's smile didn't falter, but something behind her eyes cracked. The silence that followed my quiet confirmation felt like someone had turned the volume knob down on the whole universe. You could almost hear the tension clink against the rim of every untouched wine glass. Across the table, my mother blinked twice slow and calculating, like she was trying to reassemble the version of me she'd always kept in her head. My cousin's fork hovered mid-air, a piece of grilled halibut trembling on the tines. And Emily, my sister, she just stared. Her fiancé was still looking at me, processing, trying to connect dots he didn't even know existed. "You're kidding," Emily said finally. But it wasn't a laugh, it was a demand. I didn't answer, because anything I said would have either sounded like bragging or like damage control. And I wasn't doing either. Not tonight. Her fiancé, bless him, kept going. "I'm pretty sure I read something about Vance Capital acquiring Eastern Freight last year," he said slowly, eyes narrowing. "That was you." The way he said you like he was speaking to a stranger, he suddenly realized he underestimated, sent an unexpected pulse of satisfaction through me. I gave him a half nod. That deal's old news. Another beat. And then Emily laughed. Not joyfully, not kindly. She laughed the way someone laughs when the spotlight slipped off their face. Too loud, too forced. "She's joking," she said to the table. "Right." The table didn't respond. No one knew how to. The air felt heavier now, like it had thickened with all the things they never bothered to ask, all the assumptions they'd built around my silence, all the stories they told themselves to make sense of why I didn't look successful in the way they understood success. "You've always been independent," my mom said. At last, her voice tight, manufactured. Didn't want the stress of a big career. Aunt Brenda chimed in, trying to rescue the moment. "Well, it's good to see Aisha's doing something. Something." That was the word they chose. Not impressive, not meaningful, not visionary, just something. I glanced down at my plate. Dessert hadn't even arrived, but the taste in my mouth had already turned sour. This wasn't just skepticism, this was control unraveling, a story undone. A hierarchy carefully constructed over years, suddenly destabilized by a single sentence. They didn't know where to place me anymore. I used to be the quirky older sister, the quiet one, the one they pitied because I never showed off a boyfriend or posted birthday balloon backdrops on Instagram. Now they were realizing I had something they didn't power, I never handed over for approval. Still, I sat. I waited. I watched. And the betrayal began in earnest. Because it wasn't just that they didn't believe me, it's that they did and couldn't handle what that meant. Emily leaned over, her voice low and sticky sweet like it always was, when she wanted to control the room without looking like she was. You could have told us she said lips tight. I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" She blinked, didn't answer. But I already knew. Because if I had told them, they would have found a way to dismiss it, to minimize it, to make it about them. They needed me to stay small because that was the role they'd written for me. And now they didn't know how to revise the script. "You always loved keeping secrets," my mother added, not looking at me. "That's not a compliment," I said quietly. And that was when the tension snapped. Uncle Marcus gave a short laugh. "I guess success really doesn't change people. It was meant to sting. It didn't. Not like it used to. Because here's the truth, they weren't upset that I had money or that I built something. They were upset that I didn't need them to do it, that I hadn't begged for support or validation, that I'd created something real lasting and kept it all to myself." I looked around the table at the family who had spent years treating me like a cautionary tale. They thought they were safe in the story they'd constructed, that I was lonely, that I'd failed, that I drove an old car because I had no other option. They thought the absence of visible luxury meant the absence of worth. And now the cracks were showing. Because nothing unsettles a family built on appearances like a truth that doesn't match the narrative, and the real betrayal. It wasn't that I'd done well. It was that I had never needed their applause. Still, I hadn't expected how much it would shake them. And the worst part, the night wasn't even over, but the real fallout hadn't begun. Yet, the room didn't explode. It imploded. That's how I remember it. After I confirmed the jet was mine, nobody yelled. No one stormed off. There wasn't even a dramatic wine spill or someone clutching their pearls in theatrical shock. No. The real damage came in the silence. Forks hovered mid-air, waiting for someone else to speak first. Glasses stayed suspended halfway to lips. Eyes flicked between each other, measuring, recalibrating, calculating. In that moment, I wasn't Aisha, the practical sister. I wasn't the woman they'd dismissed with every wedding toast, every family game night, every holiday dinner when they listed everyone's big news and skipped me. I had become something they didn't know how to handle, a contradiction. I could see the thoughts forming in real time like a silent group text they were all reading. If she's successful, then why didn't she tell us if she has a jet? Does that mean we were wrong about her? If we were wrong, what else has she kept from us? It hit them like a wave. But for me, it had always been a slow burn. I'd been living with that dissonance for over a decade. They only noticed it now because someone else, someone they respected, had said it out loud. Emily's fiancé leaned back in his chair like he'd stumbled into a war zone he hadn't meant to trigger, his brows furrowed, fingers tapping lightly against his wine glass. "You're the one who built that courier tech startup, right?" he asked cautiously. "It was in Fast Company or Forbes or something." I just nodded. No need to elaborate. He turned to Emily, confused. "You never told me your sister was—" I didn't know Emily snapped her voice sharper than she'd probably intended. The guests picked up on it, the sharpness, the shift. My mother stiffened. Aunt Brenda pretended to re-butter a roll. Even Uncle Marcus had stopped trying to make a joke of it. I could feel it, all of them rewriting the mental file they had on me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because this was the part they never prepared for me being the one who didn't care anymore. Let me rewind. Let me tell you why this moment mattered. When I was 28, I landed in the hospital with a ruptured appendix. It turned septic. I nearly died. I was unconscious for almost 36 hours and in recovery for 2 weeks after that. Not a single family member called. Not a single one sent a card or asked if I needed help. Do you know who helped me bathe a roommate I barely knew, some guy I found on Craigslist when I couldn't afford anything else in Seattle? He brought me soup. He checked my meds. He texted his own mom to ask if she knew how to help. Meanwhile, my own mother didn't even know or maybe didn't care that I'd almost died. That was the last time I expected anything from them. I stopped sending the holiday group texts. I let birthdays pass without comment. I didn't cut them off. I just quietly let go. And the strange thing, no one noticed. Or maybe they did, but it was easier not to say anything. Easier to let the space grow and pretend it was just distance, not damage. So yes, when my name came up on that jet, it wasn't just a fun fact. It was a rupture. A tiny, unplanned detonation that forced them to see me fully for the first time. And they hated it. Not because I had succeeded, but because they had ignored me while I did. Because I had grown into something they didn't control, didn't shape, didn't even recognize. Emily couldn't stop fidgeting with her napkin. She kept smoothing it out, folding and refolding it like it was some metaphor for the evening she was trying to flatten back into shape. Her fiancé had the decency to stay quiet, but I saw the look in his eyes, admiration mixed with confusion. He was reevaluating everything. "You've always kept things to yourself," my mom finally said. Not an accusation, not quite, but definitely not kind. "I had to," I said softly, and that was the truth. When every version of you is met with eye rolls, corrections, or pity, you start to build your own narrative, one that doesn't require their approval. It's not hiding, it's self-preservation. Dessert arrived, a molten chocolate cake with raspberry coulis Emily had posted about 6 times during the week leading up to the party. It sat untouched in front of me. I wasn't hungry. I was done pretending to be full in a room that had only ever fed me crumbs. "I have an early flight," I said, as I stood folding my napkin slowly. I should go. But dessert just came out. My mom said too fast, her voice suddenly bright. I looked her dead in the eye. "Yeah, I know." I walked around the table, passing every face that had refused to ask, refused to listen, refused to believe. No one stopped me. But behind me, I heard it. A whisper. Sharp. From a cousin, maybe. "She has a jet." It wasn't envy in their voices. It was disorientation. Like they'd just realized they'd been living in a house built on assumptions. And now it had no roof. Outside, the air was cooler, quieter. The buzz of cicadas replaced the hum of fake compliments and fragile egos. I walked back to my old Honda, the one they all laughed about. It still ran like a dream, and that night it carried me home without a single hitch. I didn't look back, because something in me had shifted, and I was about to find out what that silence left behind would turn into next. But I wasn't done surprising them yet. I didn't disappear. I just went where no one was looking. After I left the engagement dinner, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call a friend to vent. I just drove, windows down, wind in my hair, the Honda's old speakers crackling with static, and an 80s R&B station I didn't have the energy to change. They thought that was the ending, that me walking away meant I was done. But really, that was the middle. The real beginning started 12 years earlier when I left home at 22 with a duffel bag, $2,000 in savings, and no backup plan. They said I was being dramatic, said I'd come to my senses and move back after a few months. I didn't. I moved to Seattle and stayed in a shared basement with no windows. I made instant noodles in a kettle and washed my clothes at a laundromat that always smelled like bleach and disappointment. I took job after job, temping customer service, digital freelance work nobody cared about. And then one night, hungry and exhausted, I opened my laptop and started coding. Nothing fancy, just a simple tool for independent couriers who needed a way to track and deliver without paying enterprise fees. I didn't even give it a name. I didn't know then that line by line I was building something that would change everything. I didn't become successful the way they imagined. There was no viral moment. No big investor sweep in, no flashy headline or tech conference reveal. There was just grit. Sleep-deprived, bone-deep, nobody's coming to save you grit. Some nights I cried into the keyboard. Other nights I drank coffee until 4 a.m. and woke up 2 hours later for my shift at a call center that docked your pay if you were late by even 30 seconds. But I kept building. And eventually, 3 years in a logistics company in Singapore emailed me. Asked if I'd ever considered scaling the product. I hadn't, but I did. I spent the next 2 years negotiating deals over Zoom calls while using a $19 webcam. I bootstrapped. I pitched. I took meetings from bathrooms when my roommates were too loud for me to focus. And eventually, it grew. We launched the full platform. We got attention, a seed round, a Series A. By 35, I was CEO of a logistics company with global clients and a valuation that could make anyone's head spin. But I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't post my wins online. I didn't even upgrade my car. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. Still, I kept showing up. Not because I needed their acceptance, but because I wanted to believe something could change. That if I just gave a little more, remembered their birthdays, paid for dinner, sent my niece a laptop for college, they'd look at me differently. They never did. In fact, the more I gave, the more suspicious they became. One year, I quietly offered to help with Emily's student loan debt. She told the entire family I was trying to buy her love. That's when it hit me. It didn't matter how generous I was. In their minds, generosity from me always had strings, because that's how they operated. So I stopped offering, and I started protecting my peace, like it was the only thing I had left. And then came the hospital, the appendix, the sepsis, the near-death moment that should have been a wake-up call. But it wasn't. Not for them. Not a single message. Not a single check-in. I could have died, and they wouldn't have known. Or worse, they would have known and still stayed silent. That's the kind of betrayal that doesn't scream. It seeps. It stains. It tells you without ever saying the words, "You don't matter enough." And when you survive, that you change. Not into someone colder, but into someone wiser. Someone who no longer bends herself into shapes that people find more convenient to accept. Someone who doesn't explain why she left or what she built or who she had to become along the way. You just show up one day with the receipts in silence. And that's what they saw at the dinner. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the version of themselves that ignored me. And for the first time, they didn't like what they saw. That night, when I got home, I opened my email and saw a message from a venture partner in New York. They wanted to bring me on as a board advisor for a new sustainability logistics initiative. Big money, bigger responsibility. I stared at the offer and realized I didn't need it. But I wanted it. Not to impress anyone, but to keep building something that couldn't be erased, belittled, or boxed into their version of me. Because I hadn't just built a company. I'd built me. And I wasn't done growing yet, But what came next, even I didn't expect it. When the silence broke, it wasn't a reconciliation, it was a scramble. The next morning, my phone buzzed just after 8:30 a.m., a name I didn't expect. Ethan, Emily's fiancé. A single message, short but loaded. Sorry if that was awkward last night. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Just respect what you've done. A lot. I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I did. Thanks. I'm used to awkward. That was just clarity. He read it instantly, replied with a thumbs up. That was enough. And honestly, it meant more than anything my family had ever said to me. Because it was clean. No subtext, no control. Just a simple acknowledgement from someone who didn't have history to untangle. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Because the validation didn't come from a bloodline. It came from someone who saw me as I was not, as I had been edited to appear. By noon, the rest followed. My cousin Taylor, who hadn't spoken to me since she borrowed money for a business idea, I gently declined, suddenly texted, "Hey stranger, let's catch up soon, coffee on me." Then came Aunt Brenda's message. Thinking about you today. Your mom told me a bit about your company. So impressive. Let's talk sometime. Each ping of my phone felt like a knock on a door I had long since bricked up. But the strangest message came from my mother. Short, clipped, almost accusatory. Why didn't you ever tell us about your business, as if that question didn't carry years of unspoken history inside it? I didn't answer. Not because I was being petty, but because I had nothing left to say. Because that question wasn't curiosity, it was damage control. It was the attempt to reclaim the narrative now that I'd forced it into the light. Had I told them years ago, they would have found a way to minimize it, to twist it, to make it their accomplishment or worse, their burden. They would have said I was exaggerating or acting above everyone, so I stopped sharing. And now they were just too late. Let me be clear, they didn't suddenly become interested in me. They became interested in the story, in the idea of a family member with a jet, with a company, with status they could mention in passing at dinner parties without ever having picked up the phone once when I needed them. They wanted the optics, not the essence. It was never about connection. It was about proximity to a success story they hadn't written, but now wanted to borrow from like it was a designer bag, and I wasn't lending anything out anymore. 2 days later, my assistant confirmed the Gulfstream was fueled and prepped for its next charter. I booked a seat on it for myself, not to escape, to reclaim. I boarded late in the evening, the sun just slipping below the Texas hills, casting amber streaks across the tarmac. I settled into the seat. Nothing flashy, just soft beige leather, a glass of mineral water in hand. No champagne, no selfies, no announcement, just peace. I looked out the window and saw the wing gleaming in the last light, a clean slash of white cutting through dusk, and for the first time in years, I exhaled. They would keep talking. Emily would spin it her way. Maybe I won the lottery. Maybe I dated someone powerful. Maybe I was lying. Didn't matter. Let them guess. Let them chase a version of me they never bothered to understand when it mattered, because the real shift wasn't in the jet, or the business, or the sudden attention. The real shift was in me. I no longer needed to be understood. I sat in that cabin with the hum of altitude rising in my ears and realized this was what freedom felt like. Not proving them wrong, not explaining myself better, just letting go. Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet departure on your terms, and that's exactly what I gave myself. But the final moment of clarity that was still coming. I used to think closure meant saying everything perfectly. Now I know it means walking away without needing to say anything at all. The jet sliced through the clouds above the Gulf, a smooth line between two worlds. One I was leaving and one I finally claimed as mine. I sat with my legs crossed, laptop closed, no music, no distraction, just sky, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel heavy or lonely. It felt clean, like a reset, like I had finally stepped out of their version of me and into my own. Later that night, I lay in bed in my quiet apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline, and memory came crawling back, uninvited but familiar. I remembered being 12, sitting on the back steps during Emily's birthday party, the one just for her friends. I'd helped Mom bake the cake, but when it was served, no one saved me a slice. I remembered prom night, watching from the window as our cousin twirled in the yard, laughing in the golden light. No one had asked if I needed a dress. No one wondered where I was. And I remembered my father before he passed, ruffling my hair with a tired smile and saying, "She's the practical one. The other's the pretty one." I didn't even know those words cut until years later when I realized I'd spent my entire life trying not to be a burden, and still somehow became a disappointment, a shadow even in my own story, until I rewrote it, line by line. Late night by late night. Failure by failure. Every time I chose not to get bitter. Every time I chose to try again. Every time I stayed quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to protect what I was building from the noise of people who never really cared. That was the power they never saw coming. They were watching for someone loud, someone flashy, someone desperate to impress. But I built my power in silence. And by the time they noticed I didn't need their attention, the next week I received 3 more messages. My mother again. "Let's talk soon. I feel like we've grown apart." My cousin Deja. "Everyone's saying you're some kind of tech genius. Come to brunch next weekend." Even Emily 2 days later. About the other night. "Maybe we should have a real conversation. I'd like that." I didn't reply. Not because I hated them, but because the version of me that needed their invitation no longer existed. That Sunday, while walking through Pike Place Market, I passed a street artist sketching faceless portraits. He looked up and asked if I wanted one done. I said no with a smile, because I'd spent too many years letting other people sketch their versions of me. And finally, I knew who I was. I was the woman who didn't have to explain why she left, or how she built something from nothing, or why she never corrected their assumptions. Because when you know your worth, you don't shout it. You live it. I don't hate my family. I just stopped letting them define me. They'll keep talking, rewriting, reframing. They'll say I changed. They'll say I forgot where I came from. Some will whisper I've become arrogant. Others will insist I was always a little different. Let them. Because I'm no longer answering to their version of me. I live in rooms they'll never enter. I make decisions they'll never understand. And I carry a peace they'll never feel because they're too busy chasing the image. And that night at the engagement dinner, that wasn't revenge. That wasn't a performance. That was truth. Quiet, undeniable truth. Delivered not by me, but by someone they wanted to believe. The irony still makes me smile, because they never would have heard it from me, but from him, from Ethan. It became real, not because it was said louder, but because it was finally in a voice they trusted. And that's okay, because I didn't need the last word. I just needed my own peace, and I found it. So now I leave you with this. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is live fully on your terms, not to prove them wrong, not to win them back, just to be free. Because closure. It's not the big speech. It's not the confrontation. It's the quiet click of the door behind you, not slammed, just shut. It's a one-way ticket on a jet they didn't know you owned. It's saying nothing and letting the silence do the rest. Have you ever faced something like this? Share your story below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because some of us were never lost. We were just building in the dark.